Good morning, everyone. I'm Betsy Cameron, and I serve as the president at Ebby Halliday Companies. Welcome to Sold Before Sunrise. I have the privilege of welcoming our guest today, Ryan Streiff with Dave Perry Miller Real Estate. He is a top producer in our Dave Perry Miller Real Estate brand. Welcome, Ryan. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Well, burning question. How did you end your evening last night, and then how did you start your morning this morning?
Well, last night was a little bit different than normal. I was actually showing till a little after 9 o'clock, which is not what I normally do. Frankly, I try to set those boundaries for my family life, but the family's at the lake house, and so I'm able to kind of just fill my calendar. So I was back in the office before 8 this morning, just trying to play catch up. There's a lot of activity going on right now, and just sometimes you feel like you're kind of drowning, and you just have to work a little later or get up a little bit earlier in order to kind of, during those quiet moments, get ahead and catch up on emails and stuff like that.
And summer has started, so that's good. The kids are off to the lake.
It is, yeah. So
Uh-huh.
it's, very seasonal business, especially the
Right.
higher the price point, the more that's true. And so, we're trying to kind of close out the spring season here, and summer is definitely slow. Like I said, especially as you climb up the price levels with people, second homes, leaving to go to California, Colorado, Wyoming, and so we're sometimes take houses off the market during that time frame. So it's a challenging market right now, and so we're just trying to figure out how do we get these sold, and then the houses we have in the title company, there seems to be a curveball or a challenge, and just work through that to keep it on the tracks. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last few days.
All right, good. Well, tell me a little bit about your journey into real estate,
Yeah.
how it began.
So I went to SMU, grew up here, Lake Highlands, and coming out of school, got into financial services, so investment banking, corporate finance at Brinker. And my mom was a real estate agent for Ebby Halliday, as you know. And she had moved over from Lake Highlands to the little White House, and kept, I wasn't really that happy with a 9 to 5 desk job, and kept saying, well, Ryan, why don't you consider real estate? And which I did like, but I was just like, Mom, I'm a finance guy and not going to do that. And about a year later, I said, maybe you'll give that a shot. So we started the Streiff group back at the little White House as an Ebby agent. So
So it's you and your mom.
is my mom and I, and pretty quickly we were kind of doing our own thing. She had her book of business, I had mine, but she was, a terrific mentor. She just retired this past year, and which I'm really proud of her. It's hard. That was the third time she retired, to really kind of let it go, and so she's enjoying her retirement now. But so started there, and that's when I made a decision that I thought it would be wise to move over to Dave Perry Miller, especially kind of inside the loop, to focus on that, where some of the people I went to SMU with were buying houses, and so that's where I got started with Dave's company. There's a story behind that. I'll leave that out, but it was I actually kind of, the quick summary of it is Dave himself. I saw him in a restaurant I just interviewed, and the former manager, Bud Bush, had said, Ryan, you're selling a lot of real estate, but it's not that expensive. So if you want to come back in 6 months, and when you've kind of proven you can sell luxury. So that's kind of a testament to any agent, that it's like, doors will close on you. I just happened to have dinner with my dad at Cafe Italia, and Dave was there, and I said, well, I've never seen him out, in the wild since then. But he said, I'd said, I interviewed for your company. So fast forward, after I got that news from Bud Bush, Dave said, what office did you put that investment banker for SMU? And he said, well, I told him to keep working. And Dave picked up the phone right down and called me and said, hey, Ryan, we're excited to have you come on to Dave Perry Miller. And I said, well, Dave, I'm kind of surprised, because Bud told me that there wasn't space, and to come back in 6 months. He said, Ryan, the last time I checked, my name's still on the door. So I think you're in. So that was actually how I got, and I kind of was under Dave's wing, kind of took note of what I was doing personally. And he also noticed I was buying rental properties, and said, that's smart. So that's actually how we teamed up. I helped him buy a rental property, which led to helping him with a listing, which then led to, Ryan, you want to kind of move into my office and help with my personal book of business. And then at that point, we started listing properties together, his name on one side of the sign, my name on the other side of the sign. And then that evolved all the way up until about 7 years ago, when Dave didn't know he was retiring, but he was effectively retiring. And so, frankly, he said, Ryan, I don't want to have to come into the office whenever we get a listing opportunity. And this is why your name needs to be in the group. And that's whenever the Perry Miller Streiff group was kind of born about 7 years ago. In order for Dave to be able to stay out of town and me to be able to take those appointments on my own, and then get another person to come with me for these agents meet listings. And then that's where that kind of new chapter took off.
Okay. And building that team. And how many people do you have on your team?
So we have 10 agents total, including Dave, who's kind of our chairman emeritus now. And then so 7 other agents beside myself. And David always said kind of in that 8 to 10 was kind of the magic number for him, from just a management perspective, but also synergistic perspective. And then also what's important, the medium-sized category for rankings is up to 10 agents. So that's another reason why we kind of capped it at 10.
You recently had a record-breaking sale in Collin County. Can you tell us a little bit about the story behind that
Yeah.
transaction and
Yeah.
what made that listing stand
That
out?
was a really fun one. So this property is on Red Wolf. Candidly, it was a street that I didn't really know well. The homeowners, the Rutledges, they were determined to hire an agent that they felt was coming from the Preston Hollow Park Cities market, because they thought that density of high net worth buyers is where they were going to draw from in order to get that property sold. So I was competing against other agents that I'm predominantly competing in Preston Hollow, Park Cities. And, just coming in that property, it was David Fair's previous property, and it's almost 7 acres. You come through in this serpentine driveway, and it's this really dramatic, beautiful drive up. And Streiff built this 1-level home that looks like a resort in the hill country. So, a lot of it had to do with, like, it was a special property. It was kind of one of one. But it's difficult to comp these. I think one of the things probably in the success is I didn't have any bias of like what things had sold for. And we have listings in this same price point. It was listed for $15.9 million. And I kind of felt like, well, geez, if you're going to get something that's 1.8 acres in Preston Hollow, that's at the same kind of level, and the house is just as strong, it's on 7 acres, why couldn't we get around that price? So I was looking at it look more from like what a buyer might think. And then I think the success of that whole situation was coming up with a talk track of how we came to that value, which was valuing the land first, then kind of adding in what it would cost a buyer to build a house like this. And you can absolutely get to that price point that way. And that's a good strategy just in general when you're selling real estate, because it's always going to make the house look actually properly priced or a good value. But we started kind of the process. A lot of times we're doing like a coming soon, trying to get some feedback from qualified buyers, trying to test our price if there isn't like a good comp for it. In this case, I was a little bit concerned, and I told the owners this, that some people, if we had a big broker event pre-market, which I know is, you have to be careful with clear cooperation too, because we'd want to invite other brokers. You could also get a lot of feedback that it's like, well, how did you price this? And I don't think it's worth that. And and that would kind of permeate through the market. We're also hitting that point of the seasonality of coming into the market and the importance of launching in that spring market, the prime. So, I told Matt, the homeowner, that I think we just need to get this thing on MLS. I think we just need to because I think that if the end users want to see this, those same agents that will naysay or question will gladly show up with their client and close the deal. And there were, won't name names, but there were examples of that where I told them about this coming soon for 5 weeks, but it took their client asking to see it, and then all of a sudden they show up. But another agent at another firm, it's one of the very top producers, thought that it was going to be worth something closer to 10 million. And I just didn't see it that way. And clearly the market responded. And the person that bought it was not the only one that was connecting with the property, but it did sold in 2 days, sold it for 100,000 over for 16. And I don't think any house had closed for over 10 million in Collin County. So it kind of crushed the record books. That's why we got a lot of publicity off that. And, but I think that comp now will reshape, the kind of environment for Collin County. And I think that it kind of underscores, as one client put it, that the bullseye of this city has been drugged north. And I think it really struck me when you go up and we're kind of have our tunnel vision south of 635, and a lot of those agents feel like the world ends there. And it's just kind of mind blowing how much is happening, and just beyond Prosper and Anna and Salina. And as one person put it, like, you just have to go and get lost up there, and then it kind of broadens your horizons. But so we're bullish about the opportunities, that, and a lot of people moving from close in that are moving out, and that this could help kind of spark something too. So
Yeah. Well, servicing luxury listings requires a little bit of a different approach. Can you kind of talk about how you service and marketing and client communication and overall strategy, what that looks like, if it's different?
yeah, I mean it is different. Probably the biggest difference is just the agent to meet aspect, and that varies for each agent. Generally speaking, it's somewhere I would say in the kind of 1.5 million, maybe climb to $2 million price point. It is. I encourage clients or agents to check that and look at what the competition's doing before you go on the listing presentation to kind of know what is the norm. Because there are some areas that if you all of a sudden have an agent to meet and no one else is doing that, some of the agents can get a little bit almost protective, like, what are you trying to meet my clients? And um, but we live basically mostly in a agent to meet world, so the logistical issues and just challenges of that are what really come into play, and why having a team I think is really necessary. Dave was one of the ones that forged that two agent system for these agents to meet listings. 'Cause you can't be in two places at once, and I have a licensed assistant, and other agents on the team do as well. And it really does kind of take a village. But we pride ourselves in, generally speaking, we're going to be able to accommodate every showing request or almost every showing request on our end. Now, the sellers may not be able to do it, but that's what we tell them on the front is, that's the reason why we have a team. And so that's the biggest. Otherwise, a lot of the fundamentals are very similar. But the other thing I will say is a lot of these people are CEOs or high level
Hmm.
executives. They're really successful. They have limited time. So it's kind of, they want to just get to the bottom, which I value that too, because it's like I'm busy as well. And it's kind of like, just tell me what you think, Ryan, like an executive summary. So, that's another thing is trying to condense it down to like, what am I trying to get the points across in the most concise fashion to make the right decision? So,
Right, right. What are some misconceptions people might have about luxury real estate, and how do you educate your clients or new agents? I know you talked a little bit about how, oftentimes new agents will come into the business and want to get into luxury, and um, what the expectation is and what do they need to
yeah,
do differently.
right. I think, this dovetails off one of the other questions too of like, it is hard. It's a hard space to break into. So I've often told people that one of the ways to break into that space is to partner with somebody, find somebody that you think will, obviously has kind of the skins on the wall in that neighborhood, in that price range, and partner with them in order to try and win the listing. It allows you to kind of leapfrog into that space. Otherwise, I think the mistake people make is they get that one opportunity on their own and they want to hold on to it because all they're doing is making the calculation of what they'll make, and it kind of blinds them to into thinking that they're going to get the opportunity. So
Hmm. Right. As a team leader, how do you cultivate a culture of excellence while balancing mentorship, production, and client service? I know it's a big job to be a team lead and
it is,
managing
yeah,
8 to 10.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people could probably relate with this, but if you're good at this job, odds are you're probably not the best operational person. Um, and that's true for me. Like, and I think when I finally realized, like, I just don't really love not that I don't, I like the relationships that I have with all the people on the team, but actually preparing we meet weekly. So that's kind of
Okay.
one key thing. Every Wednesday morning, we meet at 9:30 to 10:30. We, get together. We talk about coming soon listings. We talk about the market. So we're talking about the market weekly. And I think that that also allows us to kind of really feel the trends building, talking about showing traffic, talking about open house traffic, um, talking about wins, talking about, pitfalls. So that's one big thing. But I think, yeah, the point that I made, the realization that like you have to get prepared for that to have something to talk about too, not just kind of getting the monotony each week of the same thing. So Holly Aldridge, who used to be the marketing director for all of Dave Perry Miller, and then she had her first child and started to freelance for us for years. She was doing all of our marketing, and then eventually she grew into the position of operations manager. So she's our ops manager. So then she helps oversee Betsy and Amy, and that change has helped me out dramatically. So I would encourage anyone that kind of gets to that level where you could first of all, Dave always said, once you get to a certain point, you can't afford not to have an assistant. So the first thing is getting that assistant, and that's life changing. And then once I kind of get to that next kind of hill, it was having an operations manager. And that was more from having a coach, and being told that that was kind of the next step. And that was just, it was huge for
It's
me.
a game changer.
Yeah.
Well, and I think oftentimes, realtors are a little hesitant, to hire on a transaction coordinator or an assistant, and understanding and knowing when that is. So there's a, you know,
Yeah.
process to it.
Yeah. And I think I've talked to some recently, and they've even shared an assistant. Like if you're going to want to dip your toe
Sure.
into, that's a great way to do it. But I think once you have that, especially to stop doing some of those things that they can do, there's no question you'll make more money. It's just having that kind of leap of faith. And then for Holly, she's just much better at than me because it aligns with
Right.
her personality, and she's done a great job. And so it takes that piece off of more overseeing the team aspect. And then we've had a lot more advancements of keeping up with trends and things because she's at the helm of that, and I can be in people's living rooms and doing I love best.
What you do best,
Yeah.
highest and best use of your time, and having people fill the other spots to keep it rolling. As the industry continues to evolve, what do you see as the biggest hindrance or potential challenge for how agents will do business in the future, and how are you preparing your team?
That's a good question. I think that, part of that is, with AI and sort of embracing AI. I mean, I know this much about it, and just it's life changing for property descriptions, which one of my least
Right?
favorite things. But if you're not doing
Would
that, you
take
should
hours to
do
do
that
previously.
now. Absolutely. Um, but I think that, Dave and I talked about this. It was when Zillow was coming in the scene. I mean, this was like got to be 13 years ago or something. And, everyone was fearful that, it was going to just kind of take over. And, Dave said something that really struck me. It's like, this is such a emotional decision, and that reigns true all the way up to billionaires. And and then he said once, we'll have literally two billionaires, that have done hundreds of millions of dollars of transactions, without any hiccups or letting emotions get the best of them, and then there'll be like two cavemen fighting over a sub-zero refrigerator. And so, so it is just when you're talking about your home. So that's the reason why those two individuals, who obviously are two of the best deal makers, getting in the same room when it involves one of their home or one of their future homes, there's always going to need to be that human interaction. And I think, that's the reason why we'll always have a job. What that looks like, you have to be willing to adapt and change. And if you're not embracing that, you'll get left behind. I think that, people that are stuck on the way things were, um, they're out of business. They just don't know it yet. I mean,
We have to
so
evolve,
yeah, you got to evolve.
right? We
And
have to
so
evolve.
yeah,
And I think if you look at AI in a capacity where it's a help,
tool.
it's not a
Yeah,
hindrance, it's a
yeah,
tool.
yeah,
Exactly. It's a tool
yeah,
that'll help make it easier.
yeah. Well, before I got in this business, I mean, I heard about the way that people would have to show houses, and it was the shoebox, and there's a key, and you had to make sure you brought the key back to the office, and then someone had to go pick up the key to go show a house. And that was the same commission as is today when there's a key box that dropped. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So I get it too. And I think that's one of the things that we really embrace, that this is something there is no set fee. Look at it more a consultant, how difficult is going to be to sell this house. And that's how you should price it. And I think that's also what makes us different, is we aren't just saying, this is what I do every time. Well, that doesn't make sense. So
Right. Yeah. How do you empower your team members to take ownership of their business, while still maintaining a consistent brand and client experience?
yeah,
How do you have that set up?
that can be a little challenging because I want each of the agents. I've always been this way. Like, I know that you have your separate business, especially how we form this team. Dave said, Ryan, this is your chapter. You pick the people in the team. And, I wanted to pick people that were all self sufficient, that were bringing something to the table. But also recognize, especially with several agents that have been in the business longer than me, they already had their brand, and I didn't want to disrupt that. So we try to, it is a fine balance between, they have their own brand. They have a lot of us, like I said, geographically are spread out, but then we also have the Perry Miller Streiff group. So I do require that needs to be in your email signature. That needs to be, part of who you are, and, wear it proudly because, obviously we've accomplished a lot, and then together we're stronger.
Sure.
At the same time, I recognize that they're going to be marketing to their own sphere, and they want to get the phone call, not Ryan necessarily. And I have no problem with that. I mean, we're all in sales. So, but we do a lot of times a letter together, but we'll split, if I get the call or they get the call, we still split it. So a lot of that was kind of forged through how Dave and I always handle everything. Is always very fair, you know, uh, and that's kind of the same way that it is with all the agents on the team now. So
Yeah. How are you guiding your luxury clients in today's shifting market? We talked a little bit earlier about how it's a pretty challenging market, um, especially when it comes to pricing. We've talked a lot about pricing just within the company over the past month or so, and expectations and the disconnect between seller and buyer. How are you handling that?
well, it is challenging. I think you have to be running comps more often than you did previously. I've got some examples now. We're about to launch listings, and when you think back, we were talking about the price in January, February, and things just take longer to get moved out, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, now we're about to launch. Well, the market's shifted since then. So, matter of fact, this afternoon I'm gonna have to have that conversation. And you've already stuck your, stake in the ground. And we're going to list it for this, but you have to be confident enough and really understand the numbers. That's my background: investment banking, analyst, corporate finance. I was a finance manager, so the numbers part comes a little easy, and maybe I take that for granted. I need to do a better job teaching our team and other agents that same skill because it is something that's a learned skill. But I think that it's important to um, run the comps kind of appropriately, look at them again as a fresh approach, focus on the houses that are most recently selling because that's the real story. Don't get too caught up in where other people are listing things because there are some erroneous pieces of information out there where people are in. And of course, that's what each seller wants to, hang their hat on as well. My neighbor, 2 blocks away is asking this. And so I just kind of tell them politely, and we really need to focus on things that are closed and sold, especially in this market. There's fewer now buyers, and you really, that's why I tell them we have to focus on the people that are actually ready to buy because a lot of the showings we're going to have, they're not really ready to buy. They're kind of kicking tires and they're kind of waiting for rates to come down. So when to reach those now buyers. So another thing too is having those strong relationships we talked about before is where you can get an agent to confidentially tell you where something may be closing or at least close to it. So check the, active options and especially pendings. Where are those going to trade? And sometimes you'll be surprised that those are lower than you think. Those will be the comps that determine the price for your listing. So if you're not careful and you miss that, you're only focused on things in your rearview mirror. Directionally, you could be 5 or 10% too high. And in this market, if you're not close to where it's going to sell, it's most of those listings are sitting.
Yeah, bringing the data to the
Yeah,
client
correct.
to really understand,
Exactly.
like you said, the here
Yeah.
and now.
Right. As Dave used to say too, it's like our job is to put our clients in an informed position so that they can make the decision, not
That's
us.
right. That's
And
right.
and also that's less likely to get your head cut off, and lose the listing is if you inform them and then let them make the decision, then they have to kind of live or die by that decision.
Right. Right. I like that. With increasing competition and evolving buyer behavior, how are you keeping your edge in high-end real estate?
It is tough. I mean, I think, the one thing I tell our clients is that, or my team rather, is that, you're not going to be able to keep everybody happy. We can do a great job, but sometimes you're going to have to be the scapegoat, especially in a market like this that's shifting. So, but that also means that other people in the hot seat with their listings, and we're likely to get a phone call in order to potentially be agent two. And sometimes it's paid to be agent two in this market than agent one. So I try to have kind of more of a, panned out perspective. And because if you're competitive and a people pleaser, which, is probably a couple traits for people that are successful in this business. I mean, it doesn't feel good not to get it done with somebody, but and also learn like you have to kind of let those go and move on to kind of more positive energy. But it is challenging. And then I think just kind of communicating with clients right now and making sure that they're, whether it's comps or just here's all the things we've been doing, that aspect is so much more important than it was, just months or certainly in the last few years as things were moving fast enough that, most people were having success. So
Right. Okay, shifting a little bit. What advice would you give to agents who want to break into the luxury space or build a high-performing team? I know we talked in little bits and pieces
yeah.
earlier, but
Yeah.
putting
So
it
I
all
think,
together.
yeah, I think just kind of like I said before, if you have no experience, then partner with somebody is my best piece of advice and learn from them, you know, hopefully get the opportunity, obviously. And that was the most important thing. And then leverage that opportunity once you have success. As far as then taking that to maybe having a team. I think it's just recognizing at a certain point it is hard, and this business can kind of overwhelm you. As I was saying before, my day yesterday and this morning isn't typical, but I remember a point in time where it became typical. And, it's really hard on your family, on your loved ones, that, you're consistently coming home late. And so at a certain point there, I just decided like I need to be home at a certain hour and building those boundaries. But that's at the point too where I think you start having to consider co-listing something, sharing in that, giving up less in order to have that work-life balance. So once you get to that point where you're feeling stressed, it's probably a time to grow, whether it's an assistant or, partnering with somebody else. And you see that around kind of in the market. That's a very common thing now, but it's helpful when you go on vacation and you have someone that can cover for you. And
Right.
that's a mistake I see a lot of single agents is they don't really have someone to cover and then they go on vacation. And I was like that before too. And all of a sudden, then, you're not really having a vacation.
They're working the entire
Yeah, you're
vacation.
working the whole entire
Yeah.
time. You hear that all the time,
Right.
and that's going to burn you out. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a signal to grow.
To grow.
Yeah.
Exactly. What's one habit or mindset that you believe has contributed most to your success?
I think I'm just a believer of coming in the office, and so I come in every day, typically like 8:30 to 5:30. So back to that boundaries. I told my wife I'll be home by 6. We sit down and have dinner together with the kids, and I don't take calls during that. I'm not checking text during dinner, and once you get in that rhythm, then your clients know that too. Um, but the main thing is coming in the office. And Dave used to say, you need to be dressed and ready to show a $5 million house, and that was 12 years ago or more.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would be the equivalent of a $10 million today. But the point is, you have to be dressed and ready. And I see a lot of young agents, especially get in the business, who are attracted because of the flexibility and they can be in their workout clothes. And I mean, that's fine. But I think that um, I get, I mean, I had one yesterday, I had one the day before the day, like where I'm getting calls and I can literally tell them a lot of times people that busy, all of a sudden they have this little bandwidth, maybe a meeting that got canceled. And they're like, I need to take care of that call. I'm going to give Ryan a call now to talk about maybe listing my house. I've never met them before, and I can offer to sell, I can come there in an hour if that works for you and seize the moment before they change their mind. But if I wasn't dressed and I wasn't at the office and I couldn't grab the things I need to grab. So being ready and prepared. And that was also whenever I worked with Dave, when I was another team member at that point, it was honestly who was available and dressed. And so I was like, I'm going to always be ready and available and dressed. And Dave's assistant, Kathy Finn, who was just the gold standard of the business from assistants, was just always dressed to the nines. And so that is something that I talk to our agents about is when you come in the office, you need to be dressed and ready to go because it is kind of like riding and shooting with our team. Like just, all
Right.
right, you thought you're going to do this, and now all of a sudden you're showing a house this afternoon. So
That's all right.
yeah.
Good. What's something people might be surprised to learn about you outside of real estate?
I would say sometimes, people see me out and it's just, I like to dress casually, I like to go to the lake in a t-shirt and a ball cap on, and that's what I would prefer, or boots. And, so, this is like a costume whenever you're going and you have to show up dress ready, to show that $5 or $10 million house. But otherwise it's like, I like to relax. I like to kind of, hang out with friends and everything. And, I mean, I would like to think that's not that much of a surprise, but sometimes people think that this is just who I am all the
You're
time. It's
working
like,
all the
no,
time.
exactly.
Right.
And that's the biggest key is like, if you don't have that work-life balance, it doesn't matter how much money you make. I mean, you're not going to be happy. And this business is one of the worst from that perspective because people get off and then they want to talk to you, or they were over the weekends when they're not working, they want to talk to you. And so if you don't build that or have help, then, I don't think you'll be happy in the end.
Right. Okay. My last question for
Mm.
you. Being at the Ebby Halliday companies, what do you find is the most valuable about being a part of the Ebby Halliday companies?
I think our company genuinely is doing the best job now of really embracing all of the brands and making it feel cohesive. And having been an Ebby agent, and my mom was an Ebby agent all most of my adult life, I've always embraced the Ebby brand and what it brings to the table, and then now have got a lot of great relationships with people at Williams True. And I think that, when we've had listings in the past, especially kind of north of 635, I mean, I've been doing this my entire career where if I have a listing that's in, over by, Northwood Country Club or something, then I'm going to go to the Preston Keller Ebby office and come and join their tour of homes. And I was surprised early on how embracing all those agents were about, welcoming me there, appreciative that I would come there. Plus, then they got to see another listing. And so it's always been natural for me to kind of reach across the aisle and feel like we're all one big team, because I've been in both places. And I think that's something that people could learn from, and they need to do it more often. We would welcome the same with someone to come to DPM, be a part of the office tour for properties we have. And I know we've done a joint tour for the first time in the last year or so, and I think we need to do more of that, because, combined, we're a lot stronger than kind of each individual owned brands. And I remember whenever Dave Perry Miller was purchased by Ebby Halliday, because I was an Ebby agent. Fast forward, I think that, we're all on the same team and we're doing the best job of that. And I think if we embrace that, then, we'll all be more successful.
That's right. That's right. Stronger together.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so
Yeah, my
much,
pleasure.
Ryan, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you next time.